Hi, everyone, again. My name is Jason Reich. I am the Vice President of Corporate Security at the New York Times. I have been at the Times for close to 3 years. It's a new department that we've created there. A lot of my work and my career has been keeping journalists safe. Before I was at the Times, I was the head of security at BuzzFeed. I've actually spoken at GIJN for the past few years, and usually on either this theme or similar ones. Before I was at BuzzFeed, oh, there you go. There's the full bio right there. You can see it for yourself. One thing I'll just highlight is that I've spent an enormous amount of time in my career trying to wrestle with the difficult challenges of keeping journalists safe, and particularly the one removed relationship of helping journalists keep their sources safe. And we're going to talk a little bit, that's what we're going to focus on here today. But I sort of want to begin by saying that even with all my experience, this is an area that I think we're all kind of figuring it out, and there exists a lot of open legal questions and still just a lot of debate over what the best way is regarding security. I'll let Harlow, I'll turn it over to Harlow. She can introduce herself, and then I'll talk a little bit about what today's session is going to look like.
Thank you, Jason. Hi, everyone. My name is Harlow Holmes. I am the Director of Digital Security and Chief Information Security Officer at Freedom of the Press Foundation, where I have been for going on 6 years, actually, where we built a program pretty much from the ground up in order to deliver digital security information and training to journalists at a variety of newsrooms, and also to journalists who are freelancers, documentary film, and yeah, as a sliding scale organization, there is absolutely no one who does not fall within our mandate as long as they are media makers. My background actually comes from engineering. I used to be a security engineer at a pretty small shop called the Guardian Project, where I got to look kind of firsthand at how tools, that are built with like the best intentions and with the best security properties also need to be coupled with, like best practices in security, and just like, like best practices in how to keep devices safe. Because, like even the best engineered products can fail in situations of duress if, people don't have like the proper education as to why they're using the tool that they're using and how to best keep not only their usage safe, but also the entire ecosystem that touches it, which not only includes those devices like from a holistic sense, but also includes, just the ways that they tend to utilize it when they're in the field.
Great, thank you. So let me talk a little bit about our vision for today, and there's actually one more piece of background. Both of us are here speaking not just on behalf of our institutions, but on behalf of the Acos Alliance. The Acos Alliance stands for A Culture of Safety. It's an organization that was founded in the wake of the tragic killings of a number of freelance journalists in Syria back in 2013, 2014 time. It is an organization dedicated to freelance safety and promoting safety practices across the industry. The executive director of the Acos Alliance, Elizabeth Cantonese, normally runs these sessions with us. There was a family emergency. She wasn't able to join us for this session, but both Harlow and I work very closely with the Acos Alliance, and this session is being presented on behalf of the Acos Alliance. So let me pivot to what we're going to do today. I think it'll be fun and maybe a little different than the rest. We do have a deck. There will be a slideshow. It will be brief. We're going to go through it just to sort of establish some of the top concepts and to give everyone a level playing field about the risks and the challenges and some of the techniques for protecting sources. Then, if anyone in the group here likes to play the game Dungeons and Dragons, now this is going to be a little bit challenging with just 2 people, so we're going to ask everyone to suspend their disbelief a little bit, which of course is the point of playing Dungeons and Dragons. But Harlow and I are going to try and game out multiple scenarios, depending on how much time we have, on protecting a source. And in fact, it's not exactly what we're going to do. We're each going to play a role based on our own experience and our own professional background. So Harlow and the FPF are organizations dedicated to protecting freedom of the press. And so she's going to play she's going to be on the defense team. So Harlow will be, we will create scenarios where a source wants to provide information to a reporter, and Harlow and I'll be the DM, the dungeon master at first, coming up with the rules that Harlow has to come up with. How do you protect this source? What is she going to do? And we're going to try to throw like challenges at her to see if she can adapt to them. And then at sort of the halfway point, we're going to switch sides. In my background, of course, I also work to protect sources, but as the head of security for a company, I also have a lot of experience in running investigations. And so I'm going like a leak investigation. So I'm going to be on the offense team, and I'm going to play the role of the head of a security department or, a legal department that's tasked with hunting the leaker, right? So I'm going to try and see if I can break through the journalists' plans and find out who the source is and sort of interfere. What we would like from the group, if possible, it's an experiment, we're just having fun here, is we'd like to ask folks, when we finish with our brief presentation, to give us some injects. Injects mean like throw challenges at us during the course of this, of ways that you think things could be challenges that you might have faced in your careers, or question, so instead of asking a very simple question like, should I use Signal or should I use WhatsApp? How about you ask like, I'm trying to work with a source in this country or this situation. And it might be fun to just throw those into the mix, and we'll try to incorporate them into the game as we go along. And I think,
interject
go ahead.
One thing here?
Yeah.
Just a reminder, as you do inject, and we really, really encourage you to, please do remember that this session is very live and is going to be recorded. So we'd like to observe Chatham House rules in that any of the things that we discuss here that is incredibly interesting, as far as like, a learning perspective, feel free to just like, talk about that as widely as you'd like to. However, if in the event that I guess personal details or details about investigations get thrown out in here, we have a team here that will, just kind of sanitize or defang what it is that you're saying, so as not to like point to any individuals specifically, and be mindful of that if you share that over like social media or something as you're following the hashtag.
Great, thank you. That is a good point. Right. Let's make sure that all of the discussion is in the theoretical realm, because that's what we're doing here, and that makes the game more fun. So the way that I think that will play this out is brief presentation, try to keep it to 15 minutes. Then I think that we'll have time for 2 rounds, Harlow, right? So we can do the one that we did in our demonstration, just to like give folks the sense of how it works. So we'll start with that one, and Harlow and I will just run it. And depending on how that goes, and depending on how we're moving through, we may have time for another one, at which case we'll ask the group to throw out an idea, and we'll run with that. And then if people have specific questions on an issue, of course, we'll try to leave time at the end for that. So without further ado, Harlow, anything else to add before I dive in? Okay. What I need here is to share my screen. I hope that it is up for everyone here. This is a very, very simple deck that it's called Getting Information from Other People, which at the core is what we're trying to do. Just give me a moment while I open up my chat screen so I can see what's going on over there, and I can see my WhatsApp in the corner. Great. Okay. So the first thing I'll say is that this presentation is written, and many of the examples here are going to be US specific, but we're happy to talk about some international situations as well. But when it comes to any sort of legal, like my expertise is primarily on particularly when it comes to legal issues and things like that, is particularly on the United States. The security advice, I think, is more broad and can apply to other places. So we're going to talk about some key concepts, some best practices, and the problem of first contact. Okay. So this is going to be a rapid fire list here. And so we're just going to try to do definitions. Harlow, do you want to hit some of these, and then I'll do some of them? You want to explain what end-to-end encryption is, and I'll do metadata. Yeah.
Okay, sure. So this is definitely a concept that you might be familiar with, that you already know, the concept of end-to-end encryption, and it's why we're using things like Signal and WhatsApp in our daily lives. The reason why it's so important is because in addition to protecting the content of communications as you communicate to servers like, let's say, Facebook or Google, that routes those communications from you to the people that you're talking to. There's an additional property that doubly encrypts that communications in such a way that only the devices that belong to the people who are party to a conversation have the ability to take that data and turn it into something legible. And so this is really instrumental because while, when you're communicating over Slack or, like Google Chat or whatever, Google still does have the ability, should they be compelled to look at the content of what you're saying. With end-to-end encryption on things like Signal and WhatsApp, those services actually are just holding on to like inscrutable blobs. And in the case of something like what we call in the United States a court order, which would be a legitimate request for data, the only thing that they would have to hand over are those like inscrutable blobs. And so this actually shifts the balance of power in a very remarkable way from, having those third parties that hold on to our content, comply with a court order, to parties of the conversation having to comply should they be compelled to. And like end-to-end encryption isn't magic. It's not going to make legal processes go away. However, just that balance of power does give people a lot more plausible deniability and leverage ultimately, should they get into trouble.
Excellent, thank you. And actually, you kind of touched on metadata a little bit too,
yes.
Already, right? Which is, so I'll talk a little bit about verification, persistence, and watermarking. So when we talk about these great tools like Signal or WhatsApp, these wonderful digital tools that are available to us, end-to-end encryption does a very good job at making sure that the message is secure from being intercepted or being read by a third party. However, you still need to verify that the person on the other end of that communication is the person you think that you're speaking with. So there's a lot of techniques and tools for it, but I want to lock it in because it's really important. And I want to use this because when we go into our session, these are some of the terms that are going to come up. The next term is going to be called persistence, sometimes called ephemerality. This is very straightforward. If you send someone an email, it's persistent. The email lives on a few different servers in perpetuity. If you send someone a WhatsApp message, most of the time it's persistent. The WhatsApp message stays on their phone, it stays on your phone. However, both WhatsApp and Signal have a disappearing messages capability. If you enable disappearing messages, then messages are not persistent. So I just want to highlight it. It's a very, very, very useful tool. I would also argue that most communication, 95% of communication that we have, including professional and personal communication, can be non-persistent. There's not a need for persistence, right? Very few things need to be written down. And so just a good thing to note. And then we have watermarking. Watermarking means a lot of things. Specifically in the context of this discussion, it is a way to either discreetly or not discreetly tag a piece of data or a piece of content so that the source can be identified. The most simple and straightforward thing that I'm sure people are familiar with is photographers who want to demonstrate, their work have to watermark it so that somebody can't simply copy paste it and put it somewhere else. However, there exist many forms of watermarking that are more discreet. We'll talk about printer microdots, which was a big issue in the Reality Winner NSA case. We can talk about semantic watermarking, where the order of words in a sentence can be rearranged in order to sort of create a code or a fingerprint on a document. There's a few different versions of this. So we'll talk. So these are like the key concepts. And I think that we don't want to go any deeper than this because we want to keep it high level, but this will give you some of the techniques and skills that we're talking about. We're going to break the concept of types of sources into two, okay? We're going to have cultivated sources. I'll go through the strategy in a second. We're going to have what's called cultivated sources, and then you're going to have situations where you're not able to, a source just comes out of the blue, okay? So a cultivated source is somebody who you have a relationship with. They're not yet a source, and you're able to start a communication, work with them towards something. So OPSEC stands for Operational Security. Apologies, I thought I de-jargoned this deck, but I guess I didn't. So what is the strategy for someone who you have a relationship with, but maybe they want to become a source, and so they're saying, oh, I work at this place and there's something I'd like you to know, or this government information I have for you. So I'll just go through this very quickly. We want to have a verification plan. Remember, I said verification is important. What does verification plan mean? It means that every time you communicate, you have some way of knowing that you're actually communicating to the person you think you are. That can be as simple as writing to them and saying, hey, what did I order for lunch the first time we met, right? Or something like that. And that can give you some information that's verifiable by both sides. You can choose whether you're going to use Signal, WhatsApp, email, SMS, and phone calls, which I would suggest not to use, right?
Absolutely
or
not.
right, or meeting in person. I just want to emphasize that. Sorry that I have this in like the move for each thing. A cultivated source is someone. It solves a lot of problems because this is a person who you can set the stage with. You can prepare them before they do the thing that they are going to do, before they retrieve documents, before they do a thing. You have some time. And so that's why we can go through and put all this work together. Like, how are we going to do this thing? Okay. However, often we have news sources, which is what we'll call the problem of first contact. The problem of first contact, it's a little bit of a catch-22, which is, how do we teach somebody to be cautious and security conscious and privacy conscious about a thing that they did in the past, right? So it's like, we need it because we haven't met them yet. So how do you get the information out to a person you don't even know yet? And you don't even know that they're your source. And it's really challenging. And Harlow's organization does a lot of work towards this. And there's some other organizations that are trying to help guide whistleblowers, but ultimately it's really hard when you're dealing with first contact. Here are the challenges. They're likely using the simplest tools available. So they may actually just email your news organization and, to the main address and just say like, hey, I just downloaded all these important documents, right? And I'd like to give them to you. They don't have any training. Usually they're not conscious of metadata. They might be communicating with you from monitored communications. Harlow, like, is there an example you want to like throw in about like how this can happen?
Yeah, absolutely. I like to call this the asymmetry of preparedness. And it's a very theoretical problem that I think people need to be kind of conversant upon before, even taking on a news source that has come to you via, out of the blue first contact. I guess one thing that I would like to underscore is the fact, or like the last two bullet points here, where metadata actually tells such an amazing story, and in certain situations, the metadata alone is enough to go on, depending on who this particular adversary is. So if you are working with like a corporate whistleblower, for instance, perhaps the investigative team within that organization who is trying to find out who is a whistleblower might fire just like a swath of people based off of metadata alone, because that's all they need to go on, and they don't necessarily have to prove it in the same sense as you would expect in a court of law. Also, managed devices are incredibly rife for getting into trouble. And so a lot of people don't necessarily understand how managed their devices are if they have a device that is provisioned by their employer. So not only does that include things like browser history, in the case of Reality Winner, we definitely do know that Reality Winner was, visiting the news organization that she ultimately did leak to. And once again, that contributes to that metadata story.
Could you define a little bit more simply what a managed device is?
Yes, absolutely. A managed device is perhaps, depending on, if you're working in an enterprise situation or not, a device that has been given to you by your employer, and thus like the IT department will definitely have the ability to do things that you think are helpful, such as like make sure that your software is up to date, which is great. Make sure that everyone's devices at the organization are performing exactly to specification, which is also great. However, they do have like the ability to look at things like which apps you use and when. If it's a phone, they have the ability to look at, what files you might have looked at, even or downloaded, depending on the situation, if they needed to. And so these patterns of behavior are depending on the scale of, the security posture at your organization, this type of granularity actually does contribute to a really, really large picture about how employees with these devices are using those devices. And they always do have the ability to be audited. Meaning that if someone were to be very curious as to, like your usage of devices, they might look for patterns in the data, such as like, why did this person, log into Slack at 3 o'clock in the morning? Why did this person, like press the snooze button on their alarm clock when they said that they were at work? Like there's all sorts of ways to use that data, and all of that data is available. It's really just up to someone who has a question about how the device has been used in order to kind of shape that data to get a picture.
Thank you. Yeah, and by the way, for the questions that are coming up in the questions that are coming up, we will address the questions, some as they come, others we'll tack on afterwards. I think looking at the questions, we'll try to like incorporate them into the scenario that we're about to run in a couple of minutes. However, I can definitely answer Chrissy Giles' question right away. Printers 100% can be used to examine what someone has printed. Not only that, the actual printed paper can. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, I was going to say exactly that. There's a number of ways. One is that a connection to the network where you then print something that can be audited by the IT department, because when you establish that connection, you're signaling to that IT department that there is like a particular document that like is being sent to that particular printer. And so you've established a link between the device that you're printing or that you're requesting the print job from and the actual printer itself. Also, you do have to keep in mind that when you do print, in a variety of cases, you are sending that document to that printer in its entirety in order to be processed by the equipment. And so not only would that leave a trace on the network that can be administered, it also can be stored on that very printer in its hard drive once it's been received, and then like executes that print job. So there's, and that's not even to mention the fact that for a very long time, most printer manufacturers actually do have like software inside of them that like create extra, like invisible to the human eye, but still visible from a forensic perspective, things like, like printer dots, which, and we can talk about the printer dots in the reality winner case. However, I think Jason and I will kind of get into why it didn't even matter in the first place.
Right.
But still, those are definitely available in the
So
paper
yeah,
that comes out.
So yeah, we have some good questions coming in, and so I'm keeping an eye on the chat and those questions, and some of them are coming in through the WhatsApp too. So Harlow, let's I forgot to say that they're nervous too, but let's dive into now that it's 9:30, let's dive into our session. I'm going to just wanted to show one other two other pieces here. One is that we're spending time here talking about protecting our sources, but let's also not forget that this relationship and interaction is also a vector for potentially creating problems for your own news org. So we're not just talking about protecting the source. There's also some challenges and risks that can exist here. This Bash Bunny, by the way, this small little device that you see here, they're even more advanced today, but like this is years old, but this is what an attack device could look like. You can buy this. This isn't like some secret thing that only the CIA can have. You can buy this at the website there, bashbunny.com. You can buy this tool, plug it into any USB port. Yeah, they sell them all. They have, and you can go to this website, it has many fun tools for this, for use responsibly. So let me stop here, and I'm actually going to dive us into let's just dive right in and start doing our session. And then I can see some of these questions are coming up. So I think that the questions we'll work the questions into the bit. So the first thing I'd like to ask the group is if there's like a particular scenario that's like appealing to you or interesting to you, please put it in the chat. Here's the first one that we're going to do, and it might just be the one that we're going to do depending on time, and we can just add complexity to it. Okay. As we said in the beginning, I'll remind everyone. And by the way, Harla, how do we want to do the dice? We'll do score to roll. You want to explain to everyone how the dice works?
Okay. If any of you have ever played Dungeons and Dragons or any kind of other, fantasy role-playing game, ultimately this decides your fate. We would come to a point where there is a decision that has been made, and when you roll the dice, the resulting number will tell you whether or not that particular skill or that particular decision was successful.
Right, exactly. So so there's gonna be a few chances to do it, and we'll you have like, it has to be, you have to roll more than 10 or you have to roll more than 5. So if it's something that should be very easy, that's a 20-sided dice, right? Right. So that's a real nerd. That's real nerds dice. So if it's something that should be easy, right, then you would say, oh, well, you have to roll more than 5, because the odds are that on a 20-sided dice, you'll roll more than 5. And if it's something that's going to be really hard, we'd say you have to roll more than 15, or you have to roll more than 19. You have to roll a 20 in order to get it, etc. So there's some challenges there. So I'll remind everyone what the scenario is, okay? Harlow is going to play the role of the reporter, who is going to be communicating with a source, is going to cultivate a source, or we're actually going to make it first contact, because I think that's where most of the challenges are. There's going to be, we're going to talk about a source, and Harlow is going to work on protecting it. My role as the dungeon master is going to be to create the environment, the game around. So I'm going to play the role of the source. I'm going to play the role of the editor. I'm going to play the role of technology and the environment, kind of trying to trip her up. Then after 15 minutes, we're going to switch. I'm going to play the role of the investigator who works for the place that the source is working. And then Harlow is going to be the dungeon master and try to create the environment. And we're going to stop it at some point. We're not going to take it all the way to the end, but we'll try to demonstrate the way that Harlow is thinking about how protecting a source. But also, we think it's going to be valuable for everyone here to see how a company would exercise its tools in order to gain access to a source. So the scenario that we're going to start with, Harlow, you work for GIJN News, okay, which is a digital news organization based in the United States. You receive you have a secure drop you have a tips website with a secure drop set up, and you receive an email that says, hi, my name is, the person actually doesn't give their name, and they say, I work at a very, very large tech company named Beta, and I've identified some really troubling behavior at my organization, and there's this list of there's this internal documents that talk about information that the company knows is damaging, but they're not telling the investors this, and they're not telling the public this. I'd love to talk to someone in your newsroom.
Okay.
What's the next step?
Okay. You said that, do I receive this from Secure Drop, or do I receive this via email? Okay. Yes.
This was a message in your Secure Drop. So do you want to explain to everyone briefly like what the Secure Drop is, but then and then say what the step is?
Okay, so Secure Drop is Freedom of the Press's newsroom appliance and like ultimate ecosystem that might be installed in a variety of newsrooms that you're all familiar with, that uses the Tor network in order to, from a technological perspective, connect members of the public at large to newsrooms so they can maintain their anonymity. And so when I received this particular tip, my spidey senses are already going off, because I definitely do know that this person who's reaching out they know what Secure Drop is. It also requires using the Tor browser to access it. I can't necessarily, even though the company is within the United States, I can't necessarily affirm that this person is coming from the United States. So I might have questions about, their usage of Tor in the place where they are, like communicating from, but that's okay. Ultimately, I get a sense that this person has a keen sense of digital security already. And so I'm actually kind of pleased that that was like our initial contact. So what I will do, as a person at my newsroom with access to Secure Drop, is I will hop back onto my Secure Drop, and I'll let them know a couple of things. One, I might do a little bit of due diligence to ask them, like whether they have already, attempted to go through like whatever, kind of like channels that their workplace, because it's a large company, that their workplace provides in order to like properly wage their concerns. But that said, like, I'm really excited to receive some of these documents. And so I'm going to contact my editor to see if I should go ahead with this scoop.
Okay, so we'll have two roles here that we're going to do. The first is you asked, so just to summarize, you asked, you haven't yet said, so actually I'll save that one for later when you do it. First thing you go to is your editor, and your editor says, this seems like a really cool story, but this company is so big and they're so powerful that if we didn't, and their PR firm is so strong that if we don't have the actual documents themselves, and we don't show the actual documents themselves, our story is not going to land. So why don't you roll, if you can roll above 15, then just describing the documents is okay. But if you roll under 15, then you're going to need to get your hands on the live documents. What do we got?
We have a 15.
Oh, a 15. Okay, yeah. So what did I say? I said I didn't even make it clear if it was over and under. What are the odds? All right, fair enough.
No, we're gonna. We're gonna need the documents.
I should have done 16 and 16. Yeah, so you're gonna need the full documents. Okay.
Okay.
So our challenge now is that you need the full document. You need access to the full document, right? And already I see, by the way, some of the questions that are coming up are leaning towards exactly the next challenge. So now you want to go and reach out, and you already said that the first thing you were going to ask when you reply to this person is, did you already go to your company and right and raise your concerns? So once again, let's use the so here's how we're going to break this one down. Okay, if it's 0 to 10, then they went to their management to complain. If it's 11 to 15, then they didn't complain to management, but they talked to their colleagues. And if it's 16 to 20, they didn't talk to anyone. Okay. What do we got?
All right. We have a 7.
7. So they went to management. Okay. And Jacob asks, no, let me clarify. Harlow didn't recommend the source to use the company complaint process. She asked if it's something they've already done. We're definitely not recommending people do that. In fact, it's the opposite, right?
Yeah, especially also since we rolled that 7 and we know,
Yeah.
like we know in this world that this person actually already went to management with their complaints, that's going to complicate things.
Yeah. So Harla, here's your situation now. You've written back to the source and you've said, I need you to get these documents. And then you asked if they, and so the source replies and says, okay, yes, I have spoken to management about my complaints. I was ignored. I can get you the documents. They're in a shared Google Drive that 150 people in my department have access to.
Okay.
How should I get them to you?
Okay, so with the knowledge that this person, well, there's 2 interesting bits of knowledge here. We know that this person already has waged a complaint, right? So thinking way down the line, if we were to publish a story regarding these documents, this person actually might be singled out as the potential leaker because they're already have stuck out. But we also do have a little bit of plausible deniability given the fact that it's on a Google Drive, and the culture of using a Google or like resources that are stored in storage like Google Drive or like SharePoint or something like that is such that we could potentially get some documentation with a little bit of plausible deniability. But at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hedge on the side of caution. And I'm going to do the following. I'm going to reach back out to my source and say, we'd love to see that document. 2 things. One, I really, really don't want you to access those documents from a device that is provisioned by your company. Also, or, actually, no, scratch that. It doesn't really matter at this point in terms of my game or my strategy. What I would like you to do is use what we like to call the analog hole in order to maybe just use your phone to take a photograph of your device, or sorry, of those documents, just so we can just have like a look at what we're, what those documents might contain. And in doing so, you can just kind of like give yourself a little bit of plausibility or plausible deniability, and that, during the working day, as you're one of this team of 150 employees who like have access to this document, you're probably like referencing it over the course of, the work that you already do. Take the advantage of that in order to just like give us just a little bit to see if we have something there that we can work with. That said, there's a couple of tips. One is that I would like for that person to, remember about managed devices. Not only does the administrator know exactly like when you've accessed that document and what you've done with it, but you also might want to think about things like covering up your camera because you don't want IT department to see you actually holding your phone to your screen in order to like take photos. Another thing that you might want to think about is how safe is your phone? And what happens when you take a photograph on your phone? Like perhaps if your phone, automatically uploads the photos that you take up to like Google Drive, that could be problematic because that could be audited. So perhaps you want to, if you're already a Signal user, let's say, use your like notes to self feature in order to do so, or just, like signal me.
So let's throw two injects here that can be challenging. Okay. So the first piece is if you roll 10 or higher, okay, then the source has it's a BYOD policy, which means that they can use their own cell phones, right, in the office. If you roll 1 to 9, the source only has a company cell phone. Okay. And does that change anything about your plan?
Oh, we got a 6. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So my only cell phone is the one that my company provided to me. So
Not good enough.
can you explain just a little bit for folks what the analog hole means? Like a little bit more detail. What does that mean? Take a picture of your screen, and how does that help us?
Sure. So the analog hole is one of my favorite terms. What it means is it's rather than working with the original digital copies of things, we might find tactics in order to get what we want that are have the same effect, but don't touch the digital realm. And so rather than immediately sending me a document that you downloaded and I have this PDF sitting in my email inbox, taking a photo of said thing actually puts a little bit of distance from a digital perspective between the original and what I ultimately receive. And there are so many ways to be creative with that. You just kind of have to remind yourself about of those days before everything was just so entirely digital.
Okay.
But we did roll this 6. And so this person has a company managed cell phone as well.
So let's do one more piece and then we're going to switch, and I'm going to try to run the investigation and we'll see what we can do here. Okay. So the person asked, I don't remember if we got into the specific details, but they were like, okay, I'm accessing the document. I'm going to take pictures of it. How should I send it to you?
Mm-hmm. So what I would recommend is definitely Signal. This is an appropriate place for using Signal.
So you would give your cell phone, to them over the secure drop and then say, reach me on Signal?
Absolutely.
Got it.
Yeah, I would. It could be in this case, I don't like it when people use their personal devices, the same devices that they speak to their significant others on as a place to receive documents. So
can you explain why that's a problem?
Well, there's just I think compartmentalization is really, really important from a journalist's perspective, from a newsroom perspective, or anybody who's working in investigations. Compartmentalization is pretty key. To a certain extent. And I mean, sometimes it's unavoidable because obviously the convenience of having everything at your fingertips allows you, that kind of mobility, which is really key and keeps you moving. But as far as documents are concerned, sending and receiving documents that you might want to work into the investigation as a whole, I think that compartmentalization is way better. And so there are a number of tactics that people can use to get a secondary signal number that is dedicated to their investigative unit or to the newsroom itself.
Like a separate phone.
If you have any question, you can have a separate phone that is just for you for work that you also carry around in tandem. That's perfectly fine too. But yeah, if you're receiving documents, especially from random members of the public at large, I would recommend compartmentalization.
Great. So let's the last question here, and then we're going to switch, is your org now has the documents, they're preparing the story, you're going to publish, and you're going to include a link to, as the editor said, we need to see the source documents. Can you walk us through a little bit of the thinking behind posting those?
Yes. Okay. So we definitely do want to have at some point the original documents. What I'm assuming at this point is after receiving, screen caps or photos of said document, I am able to just show those photos to an editor and to other members of my unit. And we're, reading it just as we see it visually on the screen and saying wow, we could really use the actual documentation. And so I am definitely going to reach out to the source and say, thank you very much. We need more. If we were to, continue with this reporting, we're going to actually need to have that document that you are referencing, that we've already vetted with in a responsible way via the screen grabs that you gave us. So we're going to have to find a way to get that document from the Google Drive to this newsroom. We already have tools at our avail, such as our secure drop, such as the Signal connection that we've already established. There's so many things in here that could go right or could go wrong. And I would definitely prepare this whistleblower for the possibility that things could go wrong, and then say, I don't know, like what your personal, vulnerabilities are. I don't know how well you and your family are able to weather any fallout that comes next once we publish. I don't know, like how poised you are to handle litigation. But I also do know that I'm definitely able to connect you to to legal representation, perhaps sometimes pro bono, which would be awesome, that specialize in working with whistleblowers when they inevitably have to go public as they're discovered. And so once you're ready, after you've thought about this, get us that document via the secure channels that we've already established.
Okay. So let's now switch sides.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to be the investigator, and Harlow is going to manage the scenario. My first question, which is the first question in any of these investigations, is always going to be, so let's imagine that there's a crisis team at the company that comes together after this story lands, right? The first thing is going to say, are these documents real, right? And because the news organization posted the documents sort of unredacted as they are, we know that they're real. And because we know that they're real, we know that we have a leak, right? So we're verifying that there's a leak. Harlow?
I would say, okay, so what do we mean by unredacted? Because one of the
I don't mean the metadata. We'll get to that. I just meant
Yeah.
that we can see the content of the documents. The content is accurate, right? It's not like somebody made something up or that the organization is speculating. We know that they have access to something. So I know there's a leak, and now I have to run a leak investigation. The first question you always ask in a leak investigation is you ask for everyone in like the department that where the leak seems to come from. I want a record of every single person who has an HR write-up. So Harlow, what do I get with that?
Okay, so I'm going to roll the dice for you. If it is like between 1 and 11, then there are, just kind of like maybe 5 people at the organization who have an HR write-up. Anything above is going to be a little bit more difficult for you as an investigator. We'll say that there are about 25 people who have had HR write-ups. And we rolled a 12. There are 25 people
who
have had HR write-ups.
So we have 25 HR write-ups, which is going to make my job a little bit hard. Boy, something is not going well in this department. If let's
fire everyone just in general.
Yeah, well, so no joke. Like, I think that so thinking that this is trying to zero in on Jacob's point here, which is like, and I want to make it clear, by the way, that in most cases, in this scenario that we're running right now, I'm striking out here, but in most cases, this is how a source is going to get burned right away.
Yeah.
So I just want to use the example of Reality Winner, who leaked the NSA details to The Intercept. Everyone says that the story was done and they figured it out because of the printer microdots, which is told that The Intercept showed these. Reality Winner is, I think, what I'm saying. Reality Winner is the name of the it's an interesting name. It's the name of someone, the name of a whistleblower. I'll write it out here. Somebody asked what that is. Everyone who knows that story thinks that she was made, and yes, she was made because she printed at the office. There's a lot of reasons why she was burned. But if you know the full story of Reality Winner, and there's actually an excellent off-Broadway play about it called Is This a Room? That if anyone is in New York or comes to New York, I would highly recommend seeing this play. Reality Winner was sitting in her office at the NSA, and they had Fox News on all the TVs, like in the office. And this was at the peak of when people were saying that whether or not Russia was interfering in the elections. And she was working, and she had access to classified information that she was reading that said, you know, the NSA believes that Russia is interfering with the elections. And then she was seeing on the TV that Fox News was saying that they weren't. And she was so upset that she actually was complaining in the office to everyone who could hear that it drives her crazy that they always have Fox News on all the time. And it was like a bad news station. So this is kind of to that point that Harlow was asking, like, did this person, like, it's not necessarily an HR complaint, but like, if I'm going to think about who just leaked all this information to The Intercept, maybe the person who was complaining about Fox News in the office to everyone in earshot is like the first place I'm going to go. And that actually begins the investigation. So, but I struck out here. I did not get any hits here. So my next question, my next thing I'm going to search for, Harlow, is I'm going to check the network. Okay, I want to check the network logs, and I want to see, has anybody in the company before the publication, obviously after the publication, I can imagine, has anyone at the company before the publication read, is like a reader of GIJN? Give me my, what's my role? Is it just 50-50?
Yeah, let's do a 50-50.
Okay, so evens and odds?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay, yeah, let's do evens and odds. So evens, a lot of people have read it, and you can't really read any data from that. Odds, there's actually just like kind of like a small number of suspicious people.
Okay.
To look
Let's
at.
see.
All right. You rolled a 5.
Okay.
You rolled a 5.
So what did I find? I found that there's only a handful of people that have been to this website.
You do. You find that there are exactly 5 people who did so.
Okay, so now things are getting a little bit easier for us. And I want to emphasize to folks here that the Intercept, I feel like I'm always picking on the Intercept, and that's not fair, but there's for the folks on this panel, I'm just going to spill out in like some pretty clear terms that if you work for a small organization, somebody asked earlier, should we put our regular email versus only the secure drop? You know, a regular email is sometimes the best way to get information. But I will say this, if you belong to a small news organization and like you're dealing with a whistleblower in a place where maybe they don't, like, you know, from another country or something, just the fact of them knowing who you are is already a piece of, we can call it metadata, but we can call it a clue. That's already a huge clue. So when I worked at BuzzFeed, for example, okay, versus the New York Times, there's no value in saying who at my company is reading the New York Times. That's not going to give me any information. Okay. However, if I did the reverse and I said who's reading BuzzFeed, you know, it could be like in you know, a country like you know, like in Lithuania, I don't know if there's a lot of BuzzFeed readers in Lithuania. And so if I were to sort of ask in my Lithuanian company, like, who's been looking at this American internet website, I might get some data. I have one more detail I want to add.
Those listicles. So
they do. I know. Maybe I'm feeling bad for an example of this. Here's another good one to flag for people. I didn't ask Carlo this before, so now I'm going to pin it back on her.
Okay. Let
me check the server log. Let me check the logs of our company, just of our public-facing website. GIJN, this goes to the VPN question, okay? Mm-hmm. I can tell what network GIJN is, right? Like, it doesn't mean I can access the network. I just mean that, for example, the New York Times, when we are in our office, we have an IP range, right? We're big. It's a big, giant office. We run everything through, you know, we have our own network. So when the New York Times is working on a story, for example, it might be revealing to a company to identify that suddenly I'm getting tons of hits from the New York Times IP range on like my website. That's like, even just like looking at like the About Us page or the career page where they can look at the names of executives or something.
Okay,
so
wait,
do I get any hits there, Harlow?
Yeah, okay, so let me like fill out this story. And this actually did happen at the New York Times
I know.
way
Yeah,
before
that's
you
right.
joined. And
I know.
that's
Yes.
why they're lucky to have you. And then I'll go into the game master role. But like why this is actually important is I can imagine from your perspective, what you are thinking is that you might narrow down this field of, let's say, 5 employees who were looking at this story. We're looking at this particular document and correlate that to when you saw GIJN News's, address or like range of IP addresses hitting your public website, and kind of like use that information to narrow down exactly like the time frame in order to further narrow down the list of suspects. Am I correct?
I think so. So here's my last move.
Let's see. Okay.
Yeah. What did I get? Oh wait, no. I think. Yeah. We'll roll on this, and then I'll do my last play.
Okay. So let's see if the question is, does this information about whether or not? Oh no, actually. So the question is,
does it correlate?
Right. Does it correlate? Yeah. And then odds it correlates. Even it does not.
Even it doesn't. Okay. Let's see.
Oh gosh, is this a 6 or a 9? Oh no. It's a 9. So
it doesn't correlate.
It correlates.
Okay. Oh, it correlates. Great.
It
Excellent.
correlates. Yeah.
All right. So now I've got some really strong circumstantial evidence. Now let's talk about, I want to take a step back for a second and like
and how that
zoom
can be
out.
prevented. So go ahead and talk about that VPN issue.
Yeah. So obviously a VPN could help keep that information from being caught this way. There's also the idea of like just using some time dilation and not, and being conscious. That's where metadata comes in. So somebody asked earlier, could you read the messages on Signal in a managed device? And the answer is no, you can't read the Signal messages. However, the metadata, I can see that somebody would be communicating during these specific blocks of time.
Hold up. Oh, and not only that, you might see, okay, so to be granular about it, you can probably see 3 things from a managed mobile device. Depending on how it's configured. But if you had all of your options available, you can see 3 things. 1, you could see the fact that a person is from their device communicating with Signal servers, because there's really nothing, like that prevents you from seeing what network traffic is, even though you cannot see those messages. 2, you could probably see that a person, or like when a person, is using a specific app, which is another bit of metadata. So, for instance, Google knows if you don't pare it down, Google would know that roughly what time you wake up because you hit the clock app, right? And 3, you might actually see when a person downloaded a specific app. So if this person was getting back to Jason and my point before about not having like the OPSEC knowledge, if that person was like, I want to be a whistleblower, I'm going to contact this organization. They asked me to use Signal. I'm going to download Signal. Then you know that like at this specific date and time, a person started using Signal because that's when they first downloaded it from the App Store.
And this, by the way, to go into like part of a much broader debate that we don't have the time to get into right now, this is an advantage to WhatsApp, right?
Because it's so ubiquitous. You're right.
Because it's ubiquitous. So in this concept, and this is related to a lot of other security work that we do, that, if somebody's crossing a border, if somebody's at a checkpoint, and it's like Signal, unfortunately, we wish it wasn't the case. Signal is still generally known as a app that is like for people who have privacy consciousness, which are
hackers and drug dealers.
Right. Hackers, drug dealers, journalists, etc. And so WhatsApp, everyone uses WhatsApp, not in the United States, by the way, but we're getting there. I'm trying to push it along. But the ubiquity is a huge advantage. Now, there was one more question before we do my last point. I want to tie this one in. And by the way, for folks asking, there will be tip sheets and stuff like that. We're just going to actually share it. There are other people have done great jobs. We're just going to steal from them. We'll share those at the end of the session. So my last move, and this one I'm going to borrow from a great book about, well, it's just a great book in general, but it really, I think, explains the source relationship really well. It's called Bad Blood by John Cariu. And it's the story of an American tech company called Theranos that's like currently in investigation right now. I highly recommend it. And this company hired private investigators to follow the sources around it. So as Harlow said, I've narrowed things down to 5
No
people.
relation, by the way.
Oh yeah. So I've narrowed things down to 5 people. 5 people is a number that I can work with. With the resources that my company has, we can have 5 private investigators following these people around. What my company is going to do next is we're going to release a statement to the public. We're going to do 2 things simultaneously. And I hope everyone understands the way that this works. We're going to call these 5 people in for an interview. And the day that their interviews are going to happen, interrogations, the day that their interviews are going to happen, we're going to release a statement to the press that says that we believe that our information was accessed illegally, and we're actually consulting with federal law enforcement to see what laws have been broken and what charges are going to be pressed. Okay. Now, I saw someone in here asked about the legal protections and stuff. I will caveat by saying very clearly, Harlow and myself are not First Amendment lawyers. We're not. I don't feel comfortable answering that question, although I generally know the answer in the United States context. My suggestion is to say is really that this is the kind of thing that you would want to speak to a lawyer about. Broadly speaking, the theme is you should not be encouraging a source to break the law. But I just want to clarify. What I'm saying right now as the company is a bluff. We're not going to press charges on people, but they don't know that. And we're going to call them in to an interview. And so these people now, mind you, as I said earlier, these aren't like hardened, KGB like operatives here. This is like a person with a conscience who feels like their company is going wrong and spoke to a journalist. And now they find themselves sitting in a room with like 5 very scary investigators. And they just saw on the news that the company that they work for, it's not maybe that they're going to get fired, maybe they're going to go to jail. So now I start my interrogation, Harlow, and like, what do you think the odds are of me getting a confession out of these 5? How good are my odds? Where we want to put it?
So if what type of confession are we?
I just said, like, did you leak to this journalist?
Okay.
Are you the one?
So
I think you did it. We have some evidence that says that you did it.
Okay. So if you roll above an 11, you get no confession. However, 10 and below, you get one.
Let's see.
You got a 2.
All right. And the case is closed. So we managed to, so we've now, and so what is my next play here that I've identified the source? And we've seen this already. We see it with whistleblowers. Is, we attack the credibility of the source. We say, well, this person didn't actually have access. Like this person misunderstands the documents they have access to, and blah, 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 like yada, yada, yada. So let's pause. Yeah. Right. So let's pause here for a second. And I want to make sure that we like wrap with touching all the different questions that were asked, and also talk through a little bit of like, our general objective when we were going into this thing was actually to make this kind of a bummer, which is to say that most of your sources are probably already burned before they've even spoken to you. If there's one takeaway lesson, it's that. It doesn't mean, but in many cases, in cases that aren't life or death, and I want to put an asterisk on that because I know that some of the people on this in this session and some of the people at this conference are dealing with sources where their life is in peril. In those cases, I think that the question of to publish or not to publish takes on, much more meaningful significance. Yeah. I think that in this case, and this is above my pay grade and it's above Harlow's, right? Like, if we're going to publish and show these documents or not, what we want to do is we want to equip you to be able to have the right kind of conversation internally in your newsroom to say, should we go forward with this, knowing that this person is probably going to get burned, unless we did like X, Y, and Z. And in most cases, it's very hard to protect it. And then the second objective, of course, is to keep you from at least making a obvious mistake that would, reveal the source in a way that the source would feel betrayed, and that it would create a reputation that you're an organization that doesn't care for your sources. Harlow, anything to add to that?
No, that's actually a perfect summation. We can talk about like specific tools and like the caveats in terms of those things, but
yeah, I think so. And I want to make sure that, we have about 5 minutes left. And I want to make sure that we make sure people leave like actually with the tools. So somebody asked for like a plan. We're going to share a whistleblower guide. I actually had it up and I dropped it. Harlow, do you mind Googling it up? And it was the one that we looked at yesterday. I think it was from the Signals Foundation.
The Signals Network, yeah.
Yeah, the Signal. No, the foundation, Delphine's.org.
No. The Signals Network, not the Signal Foundation.
I'm getting myself confused. Okay, once you find it, drop it in the chat. The bottom line is there are great resources out there that in many different languages that you can use to share with folks about this. The main lesson, some of the specifics that we want to just get to on these tools is WhatsApp and Signal are great tools. We highly advise you use them whenever you can. Never use phone or SMS, especially. By the way, instead of phone, just use a WhatsApp voice call or Signal voice call, like instead of the regular phone. This is triply important if the adversary is not a company, but it's a government. So if you're dealing with a government source, then it's like, and their safety or the fact that they could be arrested, things like that. Obviously, there's some pretty substantial things. I just want to also really emphasize that you should be careful about your own organization. So because we were trying to run through this scenario, I didn't like game out, like, what if this source was actually fake? Or what if this source was like a bad actor trying to hack your organization, stuff like that. So don't forget that like the information you're receiving
should be taken with a grain of salt until you can,
you got to vet, and by the way, this is part of that thing. Vetting is also one of the ways that we get more information, because one of the ways to vet is I have to take these documents and show them to other people, maybe who, in order to verify that the documents are legitimate, maybe I need two sources to verify. So now I have to get two people, and it just creates more for the investigator to work with. Anna asks, what about?
Really quickly on the issue of trustworthiness, especially as far as documents are concerned. This is one of the reasons why I was definitely pushing for compartmentalization, and also why, Secure Drop has that model in mind from its architectural perspective, in that you definitely do want to get yourself a sandboxed, maybe even air-gapped, preferably air-gapped place in order to view documents that come from sources of whose prominence you cannot necessarily establish yet. And so the in Secure Drop, we currently use two things. One is the Cube's operating system, which might be a bridge too far for right now, but an easy lift actually is to check out the Tails operating system, and I'll drop that link in the chat. That allows you to spin up environments on any old computer that you have use of, in order to create like a ephemeral space for you to look at sketchy things.
And someone asks here about air-gapped means that the computer doesn't touch literally physical separation between the internet So nothing is even plugged in, and there's no Wi-Fi card. There's no Wi-Fi capability. So if it's a laptop, the Wi-Fi card has been removed. If it's a computer that isn't a laptop, there's nothing plugging in to it. It's a very, very secure system. Yeah. Somebody asks about Telegram. Everyone has a different opinion on this. I'll give mine. Harlow, you can give yours. I would say that based on your threat model, which means unless you're concerned about in most cases, Telegram is fine because most companies wouldn't be able to break through Telegram, and get in there. But if you're dealing with certain governments, I would be a little bit more concerned. I would really lean more towards Signal. And again, just think about Telegram. It's like WhatsApp is almost as ubiquitous as Telegram. And I would really push people more towards WhatsApp than Telegram.
So I would say that actually WhatsApp is more ubiquitous than Telegram is. Telegram works for certain regions. So if you're thinking about as Jason mentioned before, how appropriate it is depending on that threat modeling that you did with, thinking about that source, then perhaps Telegram is appropriate. Perhaps. One thing to know is that currently, only the one-to-one, person-to-person, two people chats are end-to-end encrypted. The rest of it is actually, residing in, regular plain text on Telegram servers. So were Telegram to be served with a, some sort of order of production or whatever this country where it originates from wants to call it, they would have that plain text. So if you were talking to a group of people about your investigation, about your source, and chatting with other members of your investigative unit, that could be auditable. So this is also why Signal and WhatsApp actually are two alternatives that make things a lot easier, because you can just you can rest assured that the security properties you need are there, and you don't have to do the back work of undoing mistakes that you might have made. But that said, Telegram is one of those examples of an app that gives enough security in certain situations that is so innocuous as to slip under the radar, because that matters sometimes too.
So Harlow, this next question, I'm curious what your thoughts are. I actually have maybe a radical view on this. The next question is, do you recommend using PGP encryption? My answer is no. PGP encryption it's useful in very rare circumstances, but it is incredibly hard to use. And then sources will get frustrated, and then what often happens when people get frustrated is they'll revert to the next thing they know, which is SMS, and then you've gotten into big trouble. Harlow, do you agree? Okay.
I definitely do. So, I mean, there are sources who are incredibly skilled and know how to use PGP. And we can't all have Ed Snowden come to us as a source, right? And Ed had to teach, Glenn Greenwald how to do it. No, actually, Laura taught him. But that said, okay, so take that out, because PGP is actually really hard. It is I am very good at PGP, and I still struggle with it all the time. A lot of people, I will give you one thing to look out for. A lot of people will try to proton mail address at your newsroom, thinking that one, there's no metadata between, their email address and you're hitting your newsroom. And two, forgetting or maybe misunderstanding that you cannot, or the encryption that comes from proton mail only applies when both parties are doing end-to-end encryption. So in which case, people will just think oh, I'll get a proton mail account and then it's solved, problem solved. And that's absolutely not the case. And in which case, especially if your newsroom is not proton mail compatible, by default, there's no protection at all. And so while I love proton mail, I really do, that kind of once again, asymmetry in terms of how to use it and the managing expectations makes it even more dangerous. That said, if you want to learn PGP, hit me up, because I can definitely teach you.
So we have one last question here, which is, do you think about the impact that the leak might have in the sense that if it doesn't, is it not worth working on it? These are the kinds of discussions that you should be having in your newsroom. I think that in most cases, I would work from the state that says, like, worst case scenario, we publish and this person is immediately found out, and then what? And like work from there and then work backwards and say, is it worth it? I think is the primary tool here. Harlow, do you agree with that? Like it's an editorial discussion. It's an editorial.
Yeah.
And I think we're low on. Go ahead.
I think our communities, our newsrooms and the journalism community as a whole definitely does need to make sure that like you do know that like the Signals network exists. You do know that like Whistleblower International exists. You do know that there are people out there that like will provide, pro bono legal services to people who, like come out in the public. Because if you do decide to go with a story and you have already gamed out the scenarios that we had talked about, it's probably like within your mandate as duty of care in order to come through when things don't work out.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so I think we'll wrap this up. I want to finish by saying that these are like deep ethical questions that I don't think there's not a prescriptive approach to any of these things, but my overall advice regarding source material is that you really want to think holistically and not try to get lost in the weeds of like creating an incredibly detailed security plan, that involves like meeting in a cafe wearing disguises with like a counter surveillance team watching, if the person has been complaining to their boss the whole time, right? Like, I think that it's really worth just having a frank, common sense discussion about, put yourself in the shoes of the adversary and think, how are they going to figure this out? And I think you'll find most of the time that the solutions are actually more simple and straightforward. And maybe it makes more sense to turn a source into a whistleblower, which is say, convince them to go public, as opposed to convincing them that you'll be able to keep their identity a secret, which may not be possible.
Yeah.
So yeah, Harlow, please.
That's exactly what we're seeing right now in the case of, Frances Haugen, where, it was the logical conclusion of her participation in, this feat of public interest journalism, is that she was going to have to prepare herself for the eventual public disclosure of her identity and the fallout from her employer.
So with that, we will call this one to an end. I really always appreciate the chance to do this thing. I hope we get to do one of these things in person in the near future when we get through this awful pandemic. Please, everyone, be in touch, and thank you so much for your time.